Hello, today we are going to draw a cute and fluffy puppy. We're going to start with the head, which is a little bit of a strange shape. We started with a half moon, and now we're going to create another half moon on the bottom. That's going to be the nose of the dog. Next, we're going to just outline another shape, sort of like an oval for both of his paws. So try to keep the paws even. You can look at the other paw and try to keep them about relatively the same size, which means close to the same size. I'm going to just fix the head and round it out a bit. So this is the top of the skull. And his little snout, his little nose, is resting on his two paws. Next, we're going to add the ears. This puppy has a fluffy, floppy ears. I usually try to outline lighter, so if you make mistakes, you can erase, as I'm doing right now, just to make the nose a bit wider. And now I'm darkening up the paws because I like the size and the shape of the paws. Next, we're going to just start outlining the eyes. This puppy is sleeping with his nose and his head and his paws. And they're just like little half moons once again. Try to make the eyes the same size, the same length. And I usually, as I said before, start lighter. Then I will darken the image as I get the shape the way I want it. So there, just the outline of the eyes. And remember, we can always go back and erase or make something bigger or change the shape. It's all about the process. Next, we're going to start outlining his back. So this is the back of the puppy, and his haunches are the top of his legs, like his hips. And you can always go to the very end to see what the finished puppy looks like, so you have an idea of what you were drawing. And now I'm just drawing in his elbow, connecting the elbow to his paw. I'm just going to fix up that ear a little bit and erase my lines. And I often jump around the picture a little bit just to get the sketch the way I want it before I add the details. Now I'm going to add the nose. So it's almost like the shape of a heart. In a way, a less defined heart. And now starting from the middle of the heart, I'm going to just make a couple of curved lines for the mouth. Go back in and add the nostrils. I'm starting to like my puppy. You can start seeing the shape now of this little puppy having a nap. Next, we're just going to add some more detail in his face to start creating a little bit more shape with some use of lines. And I know this is going to be darker because it's farther away from the light, which will be coming from behind the puppy. So that means there's going to be more shadow. And this is a furry puppy. So to create more darkness, we're going to actually create more line. The more line we create, the darker it's going to look to create that shadow effect. I'm going to go back in and define the eyes a little bit more. That's a little too wide. I'm just going to erase that. Remember, your picture doesn't have to look exactly the same. Every puppy's going to look a bit different. And now I'm going to add a little bit more shadow. So now we're going to start adding the fur and the shadow and the texture. And texture meaning the fuzziness of his fur, the look of how his fur would feel. So I'm going to start a bit later and maybe add in a little bit darker from where the light source is coming. The light source is coming from where my crystal is placed. So I'm going to imagine that being the light source. So anything that's farthest away from that will be darker to create that shadow or that 3D effect of this puppy. So down here, it's going to be a bit darker. And that's his other arm there. And this is quite a fluffy little puppy. So to make the lines, you can just kind of repeat the lines over and over again, creating fur like I am, moving my pencil from the top down, and just creating that fur-like structure, or texture, pardon me. Remember, the fur is going to be coming out of that line, that outline, because he's fluffy. You can always erase that outline a little bit as you go, or you can just create the fur over top of it to blend in the actual outline of the ear, and the head, the back, as I'm doing here. So he doesn't look like just this bare puppy. And if you wanted, you can create a puppy with a bit of longer hair if you wanted, or with a little bit of shorter hair, so the lines would just be shorter. And longer, you can make the lines longer. I'm starting to like him. But I think the eyes were just a little too dark or thick, so we're going to try them again. And that's okay. Part of drawing is making mistakes, looking back, and trying again. And that's why we have an eraser. I like this better. The eyes are a little smaller and look better shut. So once again, it's kind of like a little half moon. Try to make the eyes even. I wonder what this little puppy's dreaming about. And the fur kind of has a direction. So to create the direction of the fur, just keep the lines going the same way. And now we're going to just color in his nose, because puppies usually have like a darker nose than the rest of their fur, unless it's a black puppy. But this puppy's like a lighter puppy, like a beige or white. So you can just cover in the fur. But I left a couple little white spots for the shine of his nose and his nostrils. Just defining his mouth a little bit more. The next part of this process is just going to be defining his face with the fur. So around his eyes, it's going to be almost like a half moon kind of shape. It's going to be darker down here because it's farthest away from the light. So more shadow. This is going to be less shadowy on that ear. Just clean up some lines with your eraser. And with your eraser, you can actually lighten up areas if you felt like they were too dark. But I'm going to just erase some of these lines to blend in his fur a bit more. So it looks like he's fluffy rather than this rounded line. And that's why I try to keep my lines a bit lighter so we can always go back in and erase until we know we like where the lines are. So I'm just going to go back around and erase some of these lines that I don't really need anymore, because the fur is defining his shape of his head and his body. You can really see his fluffiness and fur starting to come together. I'm going to go back and define his eyes a bit. He looks like a happy sleeping puppy. I wonder what he's dreaming about. Chasing kittens. Chewing on his toys. Just define his mouth a bit more. And it kind of has a little bit of a triangle right below his mouth, a little bit of a shape, a slight triangle. Define his nose a bit more. Just to pop out this little puppy. But remember to keep the nostrils and a little bit of shine on the top of his nose. Puppies have a little shiny wet nose. So that's what that white is on top of his nose. His face will be a bit shadowed because it's not going to get much of the light. So you can kind of squiggle. You could shade if you want a little bit more, if you know how to shade. And now we're just going to continue to go and darken up areas by actually drawing his fur and drawing more lines in the places where there'd be more shadow, as I'm doing. This ear is going to be more shadow because, like I said, it's farther from the light. Just define his head a bit more. Keep creating fur and texture with your pencil. And if you press harder on your pencil, the lines will be darker. If you put the lines draw the lines closer together, it's going to create the effect of it being darker. So the more lines you create, the darker it'll look in areas. Just going to create more texture in his head. A little more texture of fur on this ear. just have fun with it. Imagine the fur of the puppy. Imagine where the puppy would have some shadow in darker areas, like where his mouth is closest to the ground is going to be darker. And the bottom of his paw, remember there's going to be a shadow here too. Because if the light is coming from that crystal side, as you can see, it's going to be the darkest down there. There's going to be no light. But as the shadow gets away from the puppy, it'll get a little less dark. I'm going to add more texture with the front paw on this side. I'm just kind of going to create a little more roundness and definition of this paw. Go back in, create more shadow underneath the puppy. And the reason we do this is we don't want the puppy to look like he's floating in space. Just define his arm a bit more. And you can create little squiggles, different types of squiggles. You can cross hatch as well if you wanted, which is going one way with the line and then crossing over again another way. I'm going to add a bit more shadow on this side because this side would be shadowed as well. Creating our ground the puppy is lying on. So adding a little more texture to the ground. Just darkening up his back, just so he pops out a little bit more. But since the back is getting a little more shadow, I'm going to do less lines to keep it looking lighter at the top. But his back leg on this side isn't going to get any light. So let's just scribble that in, shadow that in. If you make a really dark line, darker, thicker line, it'll look darker as well. Add more shadow on that ear because it's farther away from the light. But we can leave a little bit of space between the ear and the head just so we can still see the ear. Because we shadow it all and then we won't see where the ear starts and the head starts. Add some more ground. I mean, you could add a toy in here if you wanted beside him, or a little bone if you wanted to add to the foreground. I think this puppy's pretty close to being finished. And now, this is a shader. You can buy it at an art store. You could use a Q-tip, or you could even just use your finger if you wanted. I'm just going to blend in some areas. Blend in the lines. Just to add a little more even. So if you don't have one of these shaders, you can use your finger if you wanted. Or if you like the way just the lines look, you could just leave it as is. But I like having a bit of shading to blend it in. Blend in the nose and the face. This is going to be some of the darker parts. You create the idea of a 3D effect. Create the form of this puppy by blending and shading with your finger, a shader, or just creating more line if you wanted. Remember, this is your drawing, and it might look a bit different. Your fur might look a bit different, but it's your drawing and your puppy, and that's okay. Not one drawing will ever be the same. Just going to keep blending this fur, creating this fluffy, cute, sleeping puppy. Around his face. You can step back and look if you want to add more shadow, shade. Give your picture a wipe every once in a while. Wipe away the eraser dust. And now I can go back in and I'm going to lighten up this top part of his head because the light would be hitting this part of the head. So you can use your eraser to lighten areas. I'll light up this ear and this arm because the light's going to be hitting there. Give your paper a little bit of a wipe. We're just kind of cleaning up our drawing now. Lighten up those areas if you got some pencil marks on them. I'm just going to grab one of my darker pencils. And if you want to get one of these pencil sets, you can get them in an art store. They have light to dark pencils. This is a bit of a softer lead and it's a little bit darker. So I'm just going to use it just to darken up these edges. If you don't have a special pencil set, you can just always go back in with your regular pencil and just darken up these areas. See, I'm using my finger here just to kind of smudge and darken up this area. Just going to go around my image and carefully place some lines where I feel like it could be a bit darker and more defined. I'm going to add a little darkness on this side. This will be the darkest side. And I left the ear a little bit lighter there so you could see where the ear is on the darkest side. Okay, I'm pretty happy with my puppy. You can step back and look at your puppy and see if you feel happy with it. You can always add in more shading, or you can take away the shading with the use of your eraser. But I think that is complete. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Take care.